Hi everyone, welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana and you are watching the React 19 Full Stack Masterclass series. So far in this series, we have built a solid authentication system using Laravel Sanctum. We implemented register, login and profile APIs. We integrated everything with React. We introduced the React Context API and we structured our routing properly with protected routes. Our authentication layer is now clean, secure, and scalable. But authentication alone does not make a product. So that's why today we officially begin building real application features. And we are starting the Users CRUD module. Over the next few episodes, we will build functionality like users listing, create user, update user, delete user, and show user. But in today's episode, we focus on the first step, which is building the users listing feature. And this will be a full stack. That means firstly, we will create a secure users API in Laravel and we will protect it with Sanctum auth middleware. Then we will connect that API to React and we will render real authenticated users in our dashboard. So by the end of this episode, you will see your full stack application fetching real data and displaying it inside your UI. So if you are enjoying this masterclass series and want to level up your full stack skills, make sure to subscribe and support this series. Now let's start building. But before we start, here is what we are going to cover in this today's episode. So firstly, we'll start from creating users API in Laravel. And we will protect that API using Sanctum auth middleware that we already covered. We will apply pagination on that. And we will create users route in React client-side application. Further, we will create a user service in which we will handle the API call for fetching users data. And we will fetch authenticated users in that. And lastly, we will render the users table with the actual data. So let's start from creating the API. So I will quickly jump to the code editor. And here we have this Laravel application. Lastly, we created this authentication flow in which we created this register login route. And further we created this profile and logout functionality. And these two routes are wrapped in this auth Sanctum middleware. So we have used token-based authentication system using Sanctum, okay? And here we have this database. If I'll show you the users table, here we have the following entries in this table now. So now in order to start with the users CRUD, firstly I will create one more endpoint inside this api.php. So I will add this route in this auth Sanctum middleware because anyhow that endpoint should be accessible after user authentication. So here I will create user routes, and in order to start with the user route, firstly I will create one controller inside Laravel application. So if I will show you the folder structure inside app, http, controllers, we have one folder as API. Inside this, we have one controller as auth controller. And this controller is responsible for handling all the authentication functionalities for the user, in which we have register, login, profile, and this logout functionality. So now in the similar way, I will create one more controller in order to handle all the CRUD functionalities for the users. So I will quickly jump to the terminal, and inside this Laravel project folder, I will create a new controller using PHP addition make controller. And I want to create this controller inside the same folder as API. So I will have to specify the folder name as API. And inside this, I will create a controller as user controller. Okay, and I'm going to create this controller for handling the CRUD operations, right? And this is for API only, not for the web view. So here, while creating the controller, we can specify the resource flag, right? So that resource flag will include some predefined methods in which we will have methods like index, create, show, edit, update, and destroy, right? But in the resource methods, a few methods are available to render the blade view. But here I'm going to create an API, right? So in API, we don't need those methods, meaning we are not going to render any blade file here. This will be a purely API. So here, after specifying the controller name, I will specify one flag as API. If you are not sure about this, let's remove it first. And let's type PHP addition command only. And let's scroll to top. Here in make controller, let's add --help. PHP addition make controller --help. Here we have all the available flags for creating the controller. The first one is --API. This will exclude the create and edit methods because these methods are available to render the blade file in Laravel, right? And here we have this resource flag, which is for generating the resource methods for the controller. So I will be going to use this --API because I don't need create and edit method for handling the CRUD operations. So I will use make controller. Here I will specify API / user controller --API. Now let's hit enter. And yes, the user controller has been created inside API folder, right? And here we should have some predefined methods in this user controller as index, store, show, update, and destroy. Here we don't have the create and edit function. So now let's start with this index function. Here we will create one functionality to fetch all the users from the users table. So if I will jump to the users table, here inside the database, we have the following fields inside the users table as ID, name, email, email verified, password, remember token, and these date fields. So for fetching the users data, I will be using model as user because this model is associated with that table and migration, right? So I will be using user select function. So instead of using get or all function, I want to fetch the selected data from the users table in which I will specify the columns which I want to fetch from the users table. So I will use select function and I will fetch the selected fields as ID, name, email, and date field. Okay. So I will pass ID, name, email, and let's say I want to fetch created at field. Now I want to fetch the data in the descending order. So for that, Laravel Eloquent provides function as latest. And also I want to paginate the data so that later when we will have large amount of data inside the users table, the data will be fetched in the form of chunks. Now let's capture this response in a variable as users, and we will have to return the response in the JSON format. So for returning the response in the JSON format, I will use the same pattern that I have already used in the auth controller. So for this user profile, we have used success, message, and data attribute, right? So I will copy this same format and I will paste it inside this. Now in the data, I will pass the users data. So I will use users, and here I will change this message slightly as users fetched successfully. Now also we need to use try catch block so that it will handle the exception. Okay. And in the exception block, I will use this 500 status error message. I will paste it inside this, and let's import this exception class. Now I will move this rest of the codes inside this try block itself. Let's save it. And now we have to create one route in order to execute this function. So I will jump to the api.php and inside this protected routes, meaning inside this middleware itself, I will create the routes for the users. So I will use route : and here we created the resource controller for the API, right? So instead of defining routes for every separate functions, I will use API resource here in order to call all the functions for this route. So I will use API resource, and here we have to specify the resource name. So I will specify endpoint as users, and this will call the user controller simply : class. This is similar to normal resource controller. In general resource controller, we write in this way, right? So this will include the create and edit function as well. But if we'll use API resource in the endpoint, it won't include those methods. If I will navigate to the terminal, and now if I will show you, so I will type php addition route list. Now we can see we have these available routes as API/users. Okay, we have index, store, show, and update method only. But if we'll use resource function inside that, this will include those all methods. Let's recheck now. Yes. Now if we'll check the route definition, here this has included create, show, update, destroy, and edit functions as well. So here this is the quick difference. Okay. So let's change this back to API resource. Now our user index, meaning user listing functionality, is completed. So now let's test this API endpoint in the Postman before consuming this in the React side. So inside this Postman, firstly I will trigger this login API. So let me resize this first. Yes, so in the login API, let's say I will try to log in through this user. Yeah, I have the authentication token now. I will copy this token and I will jump to the new tab. Firstly, inside this authorization, I will select this bearer token and I will paste that newly created token. Now in the endpoint, I will copy any of the endpoint. I will paste it. And for accessing the users route, we have the API endpoint as API/users for the GET request, which will call this users.index function. So I will be using API/users, right? So let's trigger this API endpoint, and this returned 500 as internal server error. So let's check the error response. So in the preview, this said route login not defined. So inside the headers, we have to pass the content type as application/JSON and accept as application/JSON. Now let's retrigger this API, and they said unauthenticated. So that means our token got expired. So firstly, I will regenerate this token. Yes, I have regenerated it. Now I will use this token in order to fetch the user profile data. Yes, we are able to fetch it. Now I will use the same token here in the authorization of this bearer token. Yes, now I'm able to fetch the user data successfully. So this data is coming in the paginated format. Let me increase this height and I will toggle it in the right sidebar. Okay, now it is visible properly. So we have total 5 users inside the users table. Okay, it is coming properly. Now we have to consume this API in the React side. So let's jump to the React application now. And previously we implemented this auth context. We created this context API and we wrapped this provider in the main component. So here we have this app.jsx and we wrapped this auth provider for every routes. So now in order to render that users listing, I will create one more component as a pages. So inside this pages, we have folder as auth in which we have these login and register components. Further, we have this dashboard folder in which we have dashboard and profile JSX component. So similar to this dashboard folder, I will add one more folder inside pages folder itself. This will be users, because in the users folder, we will have multiple components. We will have components for user listing. We will have form for adding and updating the user, right? So better to create a new folder, and inside this, I will keep all the components related to users module. So firstly, I will create one component as users list.jsx. Okay. Now in the upcoming episodes, we will create a couple of more components as create user, edit user, like that. Now let's go ahead with designing the users listing component. So firstly, I will create one function component. So I will use arrow function again, const users list. I will define the arrow function here and I will export it directly from here. Now inside this, I will use return function and I will return some JSX. So firstly, I will create one div, which will be a wrapper, and inside this, I will create one h2 element so that I will copy it from profile itself. I will paste it inside this users list component and I will change this title as users list. Let me dock this sidebar, and inside this div, I will add a few classes like bg, white, shadow, and this should be rounded border, and I will add some padding as padding 6. Now further, after this headline, I will create table component, and inside this I will use tailwind classes again as width full, border as collapse. Here we will have users listing. Okay, and inside this table, let's open the t head as table header, and further I will add tr, and inside this tr, let's create th. So inside this th, I will define a field as table header id, and I will style it by adding some classes. Let's say border, padding as 2, and text alignment as left. Also, I will add some classes in the table row. So I will add bg gray, let's say 100, and I will duplicate this th in order to have multiple fields. Next, I will add name, email, created at, and I will add one more for actions button. So I will add action. Now after this t head, I will open t body, and inside this t body, again I will open tr, and inside this we will have td. So as of now, I will add one static data in order to check whether it is rendering properly or not. email@test.com, created at some date. Okay, and we will have some button here. So I will create button as edit and delete. Now let's style this button as bg blue 500, text white, padding x3 and padding y as 1, and let's make it rounded. Now I will add the same classes in the delete button as well, and I will change this color to BG red 500. Now I will render this component from the route. So I will jump to the app component, and in the protected routes, I will define one more route. Currently, if I'll navigate to the application, so firstly I will log into our application. And here we have this dashboard. Okay, we have already added these two sidebar menus as users and posts, which are coming soon. Now we will be integrating our users list component in this users sidebar menu. So let's define one route here. So I will add one comment as users route, and here I will define one route. Now I will pass the prop as path. So I will specify the route as dashboard, and I will set users because this is users module, right? And this will render the users list component. So inside element, I will render users list. Now I will jump to the sidebar component. So for the sidebar component, we have this dashboard layout. Inside this, we have sidebar component, right? So let's navigate to this sidebar component, and here we have these sidebar menus. So inside nav link, we already added two attribute, and this has already defined a route as dashboard/users. So let's navigate to the browser, and let's click on this users navigation menu. And yes, this has rendered that users listing component. From here we can switch to the dashboard and users. But here we have one more issue now for the active menu. And this is happening because this route is being matched in both routes. So in the dashboard, we have the URL as /dashboard. And also in the users listing, this dashboard URL is contained. So that's why this is confused for both URLs. But nothing to worry, React Router provides that solution. So I will jump to the official website of React Router. And here we have this docs. So in the nav link, let's search for nav link because we have used nav link component here, right? So in the nav link component, if any URL ends with some specific URL, then for that, this provides one attribute as end. So this will match the exact URL from the given URL, and based on that, this will make that tab to active. So previously in older versions, we had one attribute as exact. Okay. So that was checking the exact match of the URL, and based on that only, it was making the selected to that tab. So here I will use this end attribute, and based on that, this will solve that issue. So here we have to use this end in the dashboard itself. Now if we'll jump to the browser, let's check our application, and yes, now the dashboard tab is no longer active when we are active on the users menu. If we'll jump back to the dashboard, yes, dashboard is active now. If we'll switch back to the users, yes, users menu is active now. So this got resolved now. Now let's style it properly. So I will change this border color inside users listing component. So inside this th, I will set border gray, let's say 200, and I will apply the same class in every th. Okay, this is done. And let's add the same classes in the td as well. So here I will copy this entire class name attribute. and I will add it in every TD here. I will select all the TD together and I will paste all the classes. So here I will wrap these buttons in a div, and that I will set some class as flags and gap as, let's say, 2. So there will be some gap between the buttons. If we'll check now, yes, this looks perfect. And also we can add the cursor pointer class in every button. Cursor pointer. Here in the tailwind, we won't have the cursor pointer by default in buttons. Okay. And let's add hover bg class as well. Hover bg blue 600 and in this red 600. Okay, perfect. Now here we have to render the actual data which are coming from the API response. So here we already have this tested API response. Now I will consume this API in the front end in order to render the user's data. So that we can write it here inside users list itself, meaning we can write the business logic inside the component itself, or we can create that business logic in a separate file. So we will follow the standard approach because the component is responsible for handling the JSX operation, not for writing all the business logic. Because when your application will grow, there will be some issue with handling and organizing the coding structure. So inside source folder itself, I will create one more folder as services. So inside services, we will write all the business logic based on our module. So in Laravel, we already worked on the design patterns, right? So in the same way, here we will separate our code base and we will write our business logic separately from the component. So inside these services, I will create one file as user service.js. This is not a component, so that's why I have kept the extension as .js, not .jsx, because this is a normal JavaScript file in which we will write the business logic for performing the API calls. So inside this, I will define one function as user service, and here inside this user service, I will define a synchronous function. So I will use async get users because we are fetching multiple users, right? And I will export it. Okay, this is done. Now here we have to make the API call. So for making the API call, again I will use fetch function, and here I will have to pass this entire endpoint, right? So let's copy this endpoint and I will paste it like this. Now our backend API URL is common for every APIs, right? So what I will do, I will keep it in a variable as of now, just like const API URL, and I will paste it like this. And I will use this variable here. So I will use backtick $API URL / users, and inside this we have to pass the headers, means authorization, and accept content. So I will define one object as headers, and inside this we have to pass the authorization as bearer token. So here we will need bearer token, and we will have to get the token from local storage. But if you remembered, we already have this auth context created, and we already fetched the token from this local storage here, right? And here we already returned the user data, loading state, logout, and get profile functions. Now instead of fetching token from local storage in every other component, better to keep it centralized in the context provider itself. So from this context itself, I will return the token as well, so that everywhere we will have one common utilization of the token. And we won't need to fetch token from local storage again and again in every component or in every service class. So from this auth context, I will return token as well. So from this auth context, we will have to expose the token, but currently in this auth context provider, we captured the token in this get profile function. So firstly, we'll have to make this token to public so that we can expose it from here. Okay. So what I will do, I will define one state variable, and I will get this token from local storage, and I will set it inside that state variable. So let's define one state as token, and I will use this set token function, and here I will fetch the token from local storage, and I will set it in this state variable. Now everywhere I will be using the same variable inside this function also, and for exporting it from here. So I will remove the local storage, and here I can use that variable directly, and wherever we will use this custom hook as use auth, we can access this token directly. So now we have the centralized token added in the context provider, and everywhere we can use this because this context provider is already wrapped in above all the components. Okay. So now let's jump to the user service, and what I will do here, I will receive the token as a parameter in this get users function, and when I'll call this function inside users listing component, from there I will pass that token as a function parameter. Now let's pass this token in this bearer. So I will use token. This is done. Also, we will have to pass the accept property. So if we'll check this postman headers, here we already added the content type and accept. So let's add these all. Content type as application / JSON, and also we'll have to pass the accept property. Okay, this is done. Now after this, we will have to capture the response. So here I will use await first because we have created this function as async. Now let's capture this response in a variable as response, and I will check one condition. If response is not okay, then we have to throw some error, and here we will use error object. Inside this, I will add one message as failed to fetch users. Now if we have success response from this API, then we will capture this response in a variable. So firstly, I will convert that response in the JSON format. So I will use await response.json, and from here I will return the result.data because we have users listing coming in the data, which is paginated record, right? So I will return result.data. This is done. Now I will call this service inside this users listing component. So while making the API call, I will call that function directly from here. So inside this users listing component, I will define one function as fetch users, and I will make it async. Now inside this function, I will call that user service get users function. So I will import that user service here. So I will use user service dot get users function. Okay. And in this function, we have to pass the token as a function parameter. So firstly, we have to extract the token from this auth context, because here we already set that token in the state and we already exposed it in this auth context provider. So we can extract it from this use auth custom hook. So let's import this custom hook first. So what I will do, I will use const token from use auth. Now I will copy this token and I will pass it in this function. Okay. Now we have to call this function in the use effect so that when this component will be loaded, it will have the users data. So this get users function is defined as a async function here, right? So we have to call it using await. So this will have await user service dot get users, and we have passed the token. Now whatever it will return, let's capture this in a variable as data, and from here I will set this in a local state variable. So I will define one more state variable as const users set users, and we have use state hook. Now from here we can set the user data as set users data. Now we have to call this function. So I will use effect, and inside this with the empty dependencies, I will call this function. Now I will put console.log users in order to check the users list. And for extracting the token in the auth context, we have used a state. So here we have to define the user state callback function. And in this callback function itself, we will have the local storage token. Okay. Now we'll be receiving the token here in the user service, and inside the user list component, we have called this function as fetch users. Now let's jump to the browser and let's open the developer console. Let's click on this users module, and here we have the user data. Okay. So we have to capture the response from data.data, because this is API response only that we are receiving here. So we'll have to write data.data. And yes, now we have total 5 users entries. Okay. So now let's iterate this users data directly in this tbody. So just before this tr, we will use users, and we will check if we have users, then we will iterate it. So for iterating the users, we will be using map function, and let's define a variable as user. Okay. And inside this, I will keep this tr. And now for rendering the user data, I will be using this user variable user.id, user.name, email. So we will have user.email, and regarding the date, we have to parse the date before rendering it here, because again that is not in human readable format. So I will be using new date function, and inside this I will pass the user.created@date, and let's convert this to local data string. This is done. Let's save it, and if we'll refresh it, yes, we have this users listing coming properly. Now we have one console error as unique key prop. So in every tr, we have to pass some unique key prop. So as of now, I will use key attribute, and I will pass this as user.id. And before mapping it, let's check for users. So we'll be using, if we have users, then it will map it only. This is done. Now we don't have any error in the console. And these all users have been rendered successfully. Now let's rename this sidebar menu. We'll remove that coming soon because that we have already implemented here. So let's jump to this sidebar and we'll remove this coming soon. Now this is perfect. So today we officially moved beyond authentication and started building real application features. We created a protected Users API in Laravel. We structured it professionally. We applied authentication middleware in that, and we prepared our database with some pre-registered users data. And here in the client side, we created a users listing component. We consumed that backend API and we rendered all the users data here. Now in the next episode, we will be working on the create functionality. So here we will add one button as create user and we will be working on the creating user. Okay. So that's it for this episode and I will see you in the next episode. Hi everyone. Welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm your host Umesh Rana. And you are watching the React 19 Full Stack Masterclass series. And in the last episode, we implemented our users list feature that was a part of CRUD operations, which means our React application is now able to call a protected Laravel API, fetch users from the backend, and display them inside our dashboard. So our read operation of CRUD is completed. But before moving to the next CRUD operations, we are going to fix a small issue that appears in our authentication flow in the last video after doing some change. And this is actually a great learning moment because it will help you understand an important concept in React. So the actual issue is when we update local storage, it does not update the React state automatically. So for handling the token, we already used local storage and from there, we manage our authentication token, right? But when we update the token in the local storage, the component state does not update that React state automatically based on that local storage. So after fixing that, we will continue our CRUD implementation and build the create users feature. And in this episode, you will also learn a modern way to handle forms in React using React hook form, which will help us manage form state, form input validations, error handling, and form submission. And these all will be handled in a much cleaner and scalable way. So if you are enjoying this masterclass series and want to master React plus Laravel full stack development journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel and support this series. Now let's get started. So here we have the agenda of today's video. Firstly, we'll work on that fixing auth flow. Then we will start from the creating users API from the backend side. Then we will protect that API endpoint using Sanctum middleware. Further, we will jump back to the creating a new component for adding new users. So we will have to design a form and there we will install React hook form library for handling form submission and input binding things. So let's quickly jump to the browser and I will show you that issue of auth flow. And here I have navigated to the React application. So firstly, I will try to log in from one of the registered user. And when I logged in, you can see I have not redirected to the dashboard page. Usually after successful login, we were redirecting to the dashboard page, right? But when I will refresh it, yes, it redirected me to the dashboard page. So there is some issue with this auto redirection from login to this dashboard page after successful login. Now let me log out this application first. I will open the developer console and again I will retry to login. And yeah, again we have the same issue. And here we have one console error related to this API profile endpoint. So if we'll check the network tab, here in this preview, they said unauthenticated, meaning while calling this API internally, that auth token is not being passed properly. But here in the request header, it is showing. Okay. So here we have some mismatch. So that's why this API is not called properly and we are not getting the authenticated user data immediately after logging it here. So firstly, we have to debug it. So let's jump to the code editor. And here this is our React application. So firstly, I will jump to our router app.jsx component. Here we have defined two types of route, public routes and protected routes. So the login and register pages are added in the public routes, and for dashboard and other related pages, we have these protected routes. So we have issue with this protected routes layout. I will jump to this. And here we were checking this user data from use auth, which is our context API basically. And from that custom hook, we are extracting the user data and loading a state. So let's say if we'll receive the user data, meaning authenticated user data from the backend, then this will redirect to the dashboard. So that's why we used React router outlet component, else it will stay back to the login URL itself. So here, in order to debug that, I will add one console just in order to check whether are we getting user data here. I will navigate to the browser. Let me clear it and I will retry to login. And here we can say this user data is null. Why? Because this profile API is not called successfully. So this has not returned any response from the backend, and that's why we are not getting the user data here. So now let's go ahead with this debugging step. Now I will jump to the auth context because this user data is coming from that auth context. So I will navigate to this auth context, and from here we had exposed these following data as user, loading state, logout function, get profile function, and auth token. So that means anyhow we are not getting this user data from here, and which is a part of a state, and this state is being set after calling this get profile API, right? So that means this API is not being called properly and it said unauthenticated. So anyhow this bearer token is not being passed. And why? Because initially we got this token from local storage and set this to state variable as token. So first time when we are not logged into the application, we won't have this token in the local storage, right? Let me jump back to the browser, and if we'll check the application, initially we don't have token stored in the local storage. So here we have this issue, like we are not getting the authentication token from local storage because we don't have the token, right? Now let's check again. Let me clear it first. I will retry to login. And here we received the token. But if we'll check the local storage, here we don't have that token. So this token is getting removed from here, meaning it is not setting automatically after successful login. So let's jump to the login component now. And here, after submitting this login form, we were setting the token in the local storage, right? And further we were calling that get profile function. And this get profile function is defined in the auth context. So anyhow, after successful login, this is triggering this API and we are getting this token from the local storage. But due to unauthorized access response from the API, this is removing that token from the local storage here. And this stays back to the login route. So the actual issue is the token is not being refreshed when the local storage has updated token, and that component state is not able to capture that updated token from the local storage. So we will have to expose this set token function from this auth context and we have to set this token from this login component after getting the API response. So here we were setting this token in the local storage. So similar to this, we will set this token in this set token function, which is basically a function of this state, right? So that this auth context will have the updated token here. So let me copy this function name as set token, and I will expose it from this auth context provider. Now I will receive this function in this login component. So at the top, here we already used this get profile function from use auth custom hook, which is basically a auth context. So similar to this, I will use that function as set token, and I will call this function here after getting this API response just below this. Set auth token, and I will pass data.token. Now after setting the token here from the login component, we will have to make some change here while calling this function. So this function is being called on component mounting. That means when this component has been loaded, this will call this get profile function, and that time we are not getting this token. So now we have to pass this token as a dependency here in this use effect hook, so that when this token will be updated after successful login from here, then we have to recall this function as get profile, so that we will have the updated data in the user state. Now when we will have this updated data in the user state, the protected routes will have this user data, and this will allow us to redirect to the dashboard component. Okay, so let's add the dependency here as token, and based on this dependency, I will add one if condition. If we have this auth token, then I will call this function only. Else, I will set this loading state to false. Now let's jump to the browser in order to check this functionality. So let me clear this console and network tab. I will retry to log in. And yes, now this redirected me to the dashboard route, and we received the token here. And initially this user data was null, but when this token has been updated as this latest token, we have 114, then this refetched this user data, and we have this user data from API response. Now if we'll check the network call, here we can see this profile API called twice, because first time we had not that token. So that's why this returned unauthenticated. But now when we had the updated token from the local storage, this triggered this API successfully, and in the API response, this returned the authenticated user data. So now this problem has been solved. Okay, let me close this. So now in the next step, we will be working on the create user functionality. So in the last episode, we created this users listing. Here we have this users listing coming from the database. Now at the top, I will add one button. But before starting this front-end design, let me create the API first. So I will jump to the Laravel application. And here we have this backend Laravel application. We created this user controller, and we have this index function for fetching users data from the database. Now let's work on the create user functionality. So here I will add one functionality in this store function, because this is responsible for handling the create user operation. Now related to route, we already used this API resource route in order to have all the resource methods for this API, because we created this API resource methods for this user controller. So that's why we used this API resource. Now we don't have to specify further routes for accessing these all methods. So let's go ahead with creating the functionality for creating user. So firstly, we'll have to validate the input fields. Now, while creating the user, I want the same fields which we already used in the user registration. So if I will log out the application, if I will jump to the register component, we have name, email, password, and confirm password. So in the API side, I will use these fields for creating the user in the API. Okay. And here we already had this auth controller, right? And in this register function, we already added this functionality to validate the form input and creating the user and returning the response from here. So as of now, I will simply copy this entire lines and I will jump to the user controller and I will paste it here. I will import this as facade and here I will change this message as user created successfully. That's it. Currently, I have just duplicated this entire code from auth controller register function. Later we will optimize it so that we won't have this duplicate code for handling these two functionalities because both are doing same. So I will come to this optimization part later in the upcoming episodes. Currently, I'm just focusing on the Users CRUD features. So our this backend API for creating user is done. Now I will jump to the React application. And firstly, I will add one button here in this users list component, just above this users listing. Okay. So if I will check the UI, firstly, let me log in this. So I want to add one button here at the top right corner, just before this card layout. So just before this users list, here at the top, I will add one button. So before adding one more element in the root, firstly, I will create one empty fragment so that this users listing and that button will be wrapped in a single parent component. And for having the button, we need an anchor link because there would be redirection to different route for opening that create user form. So for the link, I won't use normal HTML anchor element. Instead, I will use link component from React router that we already discussed several times in previous episodes. And here I will give a title as create user. Yes, this link is visible now. Now I will style it. So I will add some classes from tailwind CSS. So I will set bg indigo, let's say 500, and on hover I will set bg indigo 600. Text white, and I will set padding X as let's say 3, padding Y as 1, and I will set it rounded. Yes, this looks like a proper button now. Now I will float this button to the right side. So for floating this button to the right side, I will use flex class from tailwind CSS. So better I will wrap this link in one more div, just like this. And in this div, I will apply a class as flex and justify end. And also we need some margin from bottom. So I will add margin bottom as 4. And yes, this looks perfect now. And now we have to add one redirection link to create user component. So firstly, I will specify the redirection link by adding one prop as 2. So in the to prop, we have to set one route for redirecting to that component. So I will set one route as dashboard/users/create because currently I'm active on the dashboard/users for this users listing. Now I want another route as dashboard/users/create like this only. So I have specified the route here. Now we have to create this route in the app component. We will have to define it here. But before that, let's create one more component for having that create user form. So I will open this sidebar, and here inside this pages, we have this users folder. So inside this folder itself, I will create one more component as create user.jsx. Now I will quickly design the form. So I will create one function component. So I will define as export const create user, and I will define arrow function here. Now I will quickly return a form layout. So firstly, I need one title to be added at the top, so that I will copy it from this users list itself. I will copy it from here and I will add it here. Now I will change this title to create user. And firstly, I will render this component so that we will get to know our design is working properly. So I will jump to the app component, and I will create one more route, and I will specify the path as dashboard/users/create, because the same path we added here in this users listing to this button. So we have to add the same path here. Now in the element, we have to render the create user component. Okay, and it should be self-closed. Now I will jump to the browser and I will click on create user button. And yes, this create user component has been rendered successfully. Now let's continue with that form design. So after this heading, I will create form. So I will open this form element, and here I will create one div for just wrapper, and inside this I will create input type text. I will set one placeholder as full name, and I will specify some classes on this. So regarding input classes, I will jump to the login component. So inside auth, we have login and register component. Both have the same design. So I will copy the classes from here and I will paste it in the create user form. Okay, this is done. Now I will copy this div and I will add it for other. So the next input we have email, and I will change this to email address. Okay, this is for full name. Further, we need input field for password. So I will change this type to password and placeholder as password. Next, I need confirm password. Okay. And lastly, we need a submit button. So again, I will copy it from login component itself. I will copy this submit button and I will paste it here. And I will change this text to create user. If I will navigate to the browser, and yes, our form is ready, but we have some design issue. I want this form to be in centered align, and I will reduce this width. Okay. So here in the form, firstly, I will add one class as space y as 6 so that we will have some spaces between these all input fields. Okay, this is done. Now I will reduce this width and I will make it in centered align. So for making this in centered align, I will create one more div and I will set the class as flex justify center. And I will wrap this entire title and form in this same div. Now if we'll check, yes, this is coming in the centered align. Now I will increase a little bit width of this form. So here, because this is our wrapper of this form and headline, so I will set width class as width full and max width as Excel. Yeah, this is perfect now. And regarding this button, if you don't want to give full width, let's remove this width full class from here. Okay, and let's set some padding from X as 3. And if you want to float this to right side, I will use flex and justify end class. So yes, this is perfect. Now we have to work on the form submission functionality. So in order to submit this form, firstly, we have to capture the form inputs data, and we have to store this data in one state variable. For login and registration form, we handled those things manually. But now from today onwards, I will introduce one more component as React hook form for handling the form. So I will search for React hook form, and here we have this official documentation of this React hook form. Let's open this. And this is available for React Web and React Native as well. So we will follow this React Web guide. So let's click on Get Started. And here we have this installation step as a quick start. So firstly, we will have to install this. So I will copy this command. I will jump to the terminal and I will paste this. Now instead of npm, I will change this to bun, because for creating this Vite application, I had used bun. But if you are using npm or yarn, you can change it accordingly. So let's hit enter. And yes, this has installed successfully. If we'll check our application in package.json, yes, this has added React hook form and we have this latest version. Now let's follow the other steps. So after installing it successfully, here this is applicable for TypeScript and JavaScript as well in React. Especially this is designed for React only. And firstly, we will have to import this use form from React hook form. So let's import it. So I will jump to the create user component, and at the top, I will use import use form from React hook form. Now in the next step, we will have to initialize this function. So when we will initialize this form, this is basically one function in which this will return a few things like register, handle submit, watch, form state, these are all properties. So from here, we will have to use these properties and methods, because this register is a function in order to bind the input field. This handle submit is one event of form submission. So we will discuss these all properties in upcoming episodes. Firstly, let's jump to the register fields tab, because we have to bind our input fields, and I will be active on this JS tab, okay, because we have followed the JS syntax. So after importing it, let's initialize it. So I will copy this line, and here inside this component, I will paste it. Now I will copy this register function, and we have to use it against every input for binding the input fields. So for binding the input fields, we will have to use this curly bracket syntax and triple dots register function, just like this. And inside this, we have to pass the input field name that we want to bind as a key for sending the form data. So here this input is especially for full name. So I will set this key as full name. Now I will copy this and let's add for email field. I will change this to email. Next we have password. So I will change this as password. And the last one is confirm password. So for confirm password, I will set it as per the backend validation field. So in Laravel, we used password confirmation as confirmed, right? So we have to set the confirm password here in the front end. So if we'll follow the registration component, here we used this password confirmation field, right? So here in the same way, I will set this key as password confirmation so that when we will send the form data to the backend, we won't have to change it again. This is done. Now in the next step, we have to use this handle submit function and we will have to apply it on the form submit event. So I will use on submit event on the form and I will call this handle submit function. Now this is one function and this will take one more function as a parameter that will handle the actual form submission. So I will pass one function as, let's say, submit form. And I will define this function here as const submit form and I will define as arrow function. Now this function will have data that we already bound with the register function. If we'll check by adding console.log data, we will have the form data of the form inputs. Let's open the developer console. Let me clear this console. And firstly, without filling up this form, I will submit this form. So on submit, we got the console log for this form data as email, full name, password, confirmation password, which are empty now because we have not filled up anything. So on submit, this captured all the form inputs. Now let's say I will fill up something. Okay. And I will submit it. Yes, we got all the data successfully. And here regarding this confirm password, we will have to change this to type as password. Okay. Now we received the data here. So in the next step, we will have to send this data to the backend Laravel API. And for that, we will have to write the business logic. So for writing the business logic for the user module, we already introduced services. So in the last episode, we created user service for having the all business logic for the users module. So from here, we kept our API logic. So we have separated our business logic from our main component. And that's why we created a separate file as user service for having all the API call and other business logic. So in the same way, for this create user, I will define one more function. So better I will copy it. And this will have create user. So I will change this to create user. And this create user will take two parameters as data and token because we need these all form data from here, right? So we will receive this data and we will pass this to the API endpoint. Now related to API endpoint, we already defined a variable at the top that is containing our base URL of our backend Laravel application, right? And here we added this endpoint as /users. So we are following the REST API architecture. So the endpoint name will be same for this users module. Only we will have to specify the method. So here I will define a key as method and this method will be type of post. Headers, we have this authorization content type and accept as application JSON. Now after this header, we will have to pass the body as well. And this body will have this data that we are getting from the form data. And we have to parse this data in the JSON. So I will use JSON.stringify. Okay, this is done. Now I will check if we have this response. If not response okay, then I will throw this result only. So I will write throw result. And if we'll have the success response, then this will return the result.data. Now we have to call this function from this create user component. So here I will call it, but in order to call this function, we have to import this user service. Okay, then only we will be able to call that function. So I will import user service from user service, and then we will call this function as user service dot create user. And if we'll check this function is async function. So in order to call this function, we have to append await. And in this function, we have to pass the data and token as well. So that token we will get it from auth context using this use auth hook, because we already exposed token from context, right? So I will get it as const token from use auth, and we have imported this. Now let's pass this token. Now we used await here in order to call this function, but in order to use await, we have to make this function to async. So I will make it async, and this error has gone now. This is from submit, and let's wrap this in try catch block so that if we'll have any error, this will be captured here. And I will console the error. Okay. Now after creating the user into the database, I want to redirect it to the users listing. Currently, I have not introduced any flash messages concept, so I will add it in upcoming episodes. Okay. So in order to redirect this to users listing component, again, I will use navigate hook from React router. So I will import use navigate from React router, and let's initialize this function here, and let's capture this object as, let's say, navigate. And I will call this function navigate, and inside this I will pass the route endpoint as dashboard/users, because I want to redirect to the users listing. Okay, this is done. Now let's test this functionality. So let's jump to the browser. Let me clear this console errors and this network logs also. So let's fill up one user. So I will add a name as John @test.com, password 123456 123456. Let's click on create user, and yes, user has been created, but we have some redirection issue. So let's check here. Okay, we missed slash here, so that's why this took the home path. Now let's remove this manually, and I will jump to the users listing now in order to verify that user has been created or not. And yes, this user has been created successfully. Okay, let's try to create one more user now. Akash, password I will set as 123456. I will create, and yes, user has been created and it redirected back to this users listing successfully. So this is done. So in this episode, we accomplished several important things. First, we fixed an authentication bug by understanding the difference between local storage and React state. Then we improved our authentication architecture by making the token reactive. And finally, we implemented the create operation of our Users CRUD module using React hook form library. So for that, we introduced React hook form, which will help us build a scalable and maintainable forms in our application. In the next episode, we will continue our CRUD journey and implement the update user feature alongside this form validation, where we will learn how to edit existing user data. So if you found this episode helpful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and continue following this masterclass series. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana, and you are watching the React 19 Full Stack Masterclass series. In the previous episode, we continued building our Users CRUD module, and we implemented the Create User feature. And we introduced React Hook Form library for managing form submissions. However, there is one important thing missing from our form right now: validation and proper error handling. Currently, our form allows users to submit invalid data. So let's jump to the form and I will show you then. So here, while creating this user API from the backend side, we added the server side validation. Let me show you that code. So I will open the Laravel backend side. And here, this is our store function. And this function is responsible for storing user data. And this data is coming from the React form. So we added this server side validation here. And this is returning the correct validation errors messages from this API response. But we have not handled these validation error messages at the client side. So let's jump to the browser first. And here, firstly, I will submit this form without filling up these input fields. When I'll submit, here in the network tab, in this users API response, we received the following error messages which are related to validations. So here we have the validation errors for these particular fields as full name. This full name field is required, email field is required, and the password field is required. So from the server side, we are getting the correct validation error messages. But at the client side, we have not displayed these validation error messages. So in today's episode, we are going to fix this, and we will implement complete form validation using React Hook Form. And we will also handle backend validation errors coming from this API response. And by the end of this video, you will understand how React Hook Form handles validation, how to show error messages, and how to handle Laravel validation errors as well. So if you are enjoying this masterclass series and learning something valuable, make sure to subscribe this channel and support this series. Now let's begin. So we will handle these validation error messages and we will display these in the form. So let's jump to the official documentation of React Hook Form. Here we have this handle errors. But this handle errors is for handling the client-side validation errors. So for this, we will have to use this form state errors. So I will come to this part in a minute. Firstly, we have to handle this server-side validation error messages. So for this React Hook Form provides a different API. So I will scroll to top. And here in the API part, we have this use form, because in this React application, here we imported use form hook from React Hook Form library. So this is basically the core hook provided by React Hook Form library. And this hook helps us manage form state, validation, errors, and submission handling. So for setting up the custom validation error messages, this use form provides some other function as well. So inside this, if we'll search for set error in the left sidebar, we have this function. So this function allows you to manually set one or more errors for the input fields. So that means using this function, we can set the custom validation error messages. But in our case, we are already getting the error messages from API response. So firstly, I will implement this set error function. So what I will do here in this use form itself, I will extract that set error function. So in order to set the validation error message, we will use this function in the catch block as of now. So firstly, I will call this function set error, and this function takes parameter in this format. The first one will be name, which is type of a string, and this will specify the input field name. The second one is error. So this will contain the field error. Okay. Here it already added the description. This is input name. And here we can set the error with its type and message. So here we have this format of setting the validation error message. We have this input field name. We can set the type as like custom, server, anything. We have this message attribute. So let's try to set a custom validation error message for full name field. And next I will specify one object and I will set the type is like custom. And in the message, I will specify full name is required. Now we have set the validation error message using this set error function. Now how will we display this error message? So for displaying the error message, React Hook Form provides one more attribute as form state errors. So for that, we will be using this form state error. So after this set error function, let's import it from form state errors using use form. Now all the errors will be contained in this errors object. So let's put console errors just in order to check the error messages. So let's jump to the application and let's navigate to this console tab. By default, this is empty. Now when we'll submit this form, yes, here we have the errors object. Inside this, we have one key as full name and we have this following attribute as message, type and this ref. So this ref is basically reference for this input field, which is a binding. So using this way, we can set the custom validation error message in React Hook Form using this set error function. Now we will set the dynamic error message because from our API response itself, we are getting all the validation error messages respective to the form fields. So what I will do from this error, I will extract the errors because the errors are coming in this errors key, right? So here, let me clear this and I will resubmit this form. So here in the errors, we are getting these all validation error messages in the console. Now I will iterate these errors in order to set the validation error messages to this React Hook Form state. So I will check one condition. If error.errors is there, then I will extract it using object.entries because this is coming in object, right? If we'll check inside errors, we have this following object. So I will use object.entries and inside this, I will pass the error.errors and then I will iterate it using for each loop. And here we have field. So I will extract these fields because this will be dynamic form fields, right? So I will extract it as field. And next we have message as well. So this should be the field and this should be the message. So I will get the messages because this can contain multiple error messages and I will iterate it. Now inside this, I will call this set error function and this will return field. So if we'll console field and messages just like this in order to check. And let me just comment this console. Let me clear out and I will resubmit this form. Yes. So now we have the field as full name and this is the message. Field is email and that respective message, password and that respective message. So we are getting the field and message, right? Now we have to apply these here in this set error function. So inside this, instead of this custom string name, I will pass this dynamic field and here I will use this object and in the type, I will set the type as server side because this is server side validation error message, and in the message this is coming in form of array, right? So I will use the first index of this message. So here I will remove this static message and I will use this messages array first index. This is done. Let's save it. And now let's enable this console now in order to check whether these all errors have been set here. So let's resubmit this form. And yes, so we have all these server-side validation errors messages have been set in this React hook form errors. Now we have to render these validation error messages respective to every input fields. So for rendering that, here we have to extract the validation error messages from this errors object itself. So respective to every input, we will have to extract the error messages and we will have to display it. So let's extract it first. So here, just after this input field, I will check one condition if errors dot full name is there, because in the console here, if I'll submit, let me comment it first. If I will submit, here we have the field as errors dot full name, errors dot email, errors dot password. So we will extract it as errors dot full name is there. Then I will display that message in paragraph element. So here I will display errors dot full name dot message. Okay. And for displaying this message in red color, I will apply one class using tailwind CSS, text red 500, text SM. Now I will copy it and I will add for other fields like email. So I will replace it as email, and next for password. Okay. And also for confirm password. So we will have to check this key. So I will come to this part later. Let's clear it and let's try to submit this form. And yes, here this returned the correct validation error messages as full name is required, email field is required, password field is required. And yes, this validation got passed now. Now I will resubmit this form. Now this said the password field must contain 6 characters and this is for email. So I will enter some correct email address and password, and I will check for this confirm password. So this said the password field confirmation does not match. So if we'll check the network response, here we have errors as this password field confirmation does not match. So which is correct? Okay. So this is working. We have handled the server side validation error message. Now I will re-enter the password correctly, and if we'll submit this form, yes, the user has been created and this redirected back to the user's listing page. So the server side validation errors have been handled properly. Now we will talk about client side validation error. So the client side validation error will restrict this API to be submitted. That means when I'm submitting this form, this is making one API call and these form fields validation have been checked from the server side. So what I want, instead of triggering this API call, firstly this will validate the form at the client side. If the form is valid, then this will submit this form so that we can save this API call. So for this, I will apply the validation on the client side. So here, let's jump to the documentation again, and we will apply the validation error at the client side using this register function itself. In this register function itself, we can apply the validation rule as like required, and this will take Boolean value as true and false. Okay. We can set other attributes as well. So again, I will jump to the API Inside this, we have this huge form, and here we have this register function. So inside this, let's scroll down, and here we have these validation rules provided by this React hook form library. We have this required as boolean, max length, max number, mean, pattern, validate, and these all including regex also, and any custom function as well. Here we can pass the regular expression as pattern, max, mean, length, and these all. Okay, so let's apply these validation errors. If you want, you can just go through this documentation. Here we have the validation and error messages, so we can apply in this object format. So let's apply the client side validation errors on this. So let's start the client side validation, and I will start it from full name input field. So here, after this full name, I will apply the required field validation. So in the second parameter, I will set the validation as required, and I will set this to true. Now I will jump to the browser and I will submit this form. You can see this is not triggering any API call, and this is just focusing on this input field which has error. But currently we are not able to see that validation error message. So for that, we will have to pass the message here instead of this boolean flag. So let's say if I want to set custom validation error message for this input field, enter the full name just like this, and if we'll submit the form now, yes, that custom validation error message at the client side has been displayed successfully. So I will keep the same validation error message that we are getting from server side as full name is required. Also, we can apply other validation rule as mean length. Okay, let's say mean length I want as 4, but here for mean length I want number as well as message. So for that, we will have to define one object, and inside this we will have to specify the mean length value in the value key. Let's say the mean length should be 5, and respectively I will have to set the message just like full name must be at least 5 chars long. Now let's jump to the browser, and if I will try to submit this form, firstly this said full name is required, and I will enter some random character, and this said the full name must be at least 5 chars long, so which is working correctly. Now I will copy this validation error message. Now I will apply this same validation for email. So in this register function, I will open this object, and firstly I will make this required as email address is required, and for validating the email I will be using regex. So for that I will use the pattern. So in the validation we have this pattern rule. So here we can apply the regex pattern for the input. So I will use this pattern, and in this pattern I will set the value for checking the valid email. So I will quickly add one regex for this email. Okay, so this will check a correct email address, and also I will set the message as please enter a valid email address. Now next I will add for password. So I will set required as please enter your password, and for the password I will set mean length as 6 characters. So again I will set this in separate object as value and message, and the message should be like the password must be 6 characters long. You can set any specific regex for this password as well. Next, I will set for confirm password. So let's add required message as please re-enter your password. And in order to validate the password, we have to match it from password field. Next, we have to match this password from this actual password field so that we will get to know whether this password and confirm password both are same. So in order to check that, we have to get the actual password from this password field value, right? So here we have this watch function basically. So in this watch function, this will track the input fields and this will return the value in the real time. So this is useful for rendering the input values and to determine what to render by condition. So if you want to apply any condition by tracking any input field in the real time, this function will be very beneficial. So I will import this watch as well. And firstly, I will just put one console.log watch function, just like this. Now I will jump to the browser. Let me clear this console and I will enter something in the input field. Now we can see we got that name here, and also this is capturing all the form inputs. So we can use this function in order to get the entered password. So let's say I have entered password as 123456. So using this watch function, I will get this password value and I will just compare it with this password confirmation field. So if we want to extract the single field, then we can pass that field name inside this watch function. Now we can see only this returned this password field value. So I will use this watch inside that pattern. So here in the validation rule, I will just match this with confirm password. So here after this required, I will use validate key and I will get the current value as confirm password. And firstly, I will check if value is equals to watch function and password. If it is equal, then okay, else this will return message as passwords do not match. Let's save it and let's jump to the browser. I have refreshed it and now let's enter some random name, email and password. I have entered password as 123456. Now firstly, I will submit it and this returned error as password confirmation. So we'll have to change this field as password confirmation. Now let's retry to submit this form. And for the empty, this returned the message as please re-enter your password. Now I have entered some different password which is not matching from the password field. Then this returned the exact message as passwords do not match. Now when I will set this to exact 123456, yes, this matched exactly. And if we'll try to submit this form with this existing email which is already registered, this should throw error as yes, the email has already been taken. So this is working properly. Now I will change this to something else. Okay. And yes, this has registered successfully. So we are done with this client side and server side validation handling using React hook form. In this episode, we significantly improved our create user feature. We implemented client-side validation using React hook form library, and we also handled the Laravel backend validation errors using the same. Now our form is much more reliable and user-friendly. In the next episode, we will continue our CRUD journey and implement the edit user functionality, where we will learn how to pre-fill forms with existing data and update records. So we have already the buttons as edit and delete. So when we'll click on edit, this should redirect to the same form with this particular user data, and that form should be pre-filled, and from there we will handle the update functionality. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and continue following this masterclass series as we build a complete full stack application step by step. So once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana, and you are watching the React 19 full stack masterclass series. In the last few episodes, we have been building a Users CRUD module step by step. So far, in the React CRUD series, we have implemented users listing, created user form, handled form validation using React hook form, and our create user functionality is now fully working. But CRUD applications are not complete without the ability to edit existing records. So in today's episode, we are going to implement edit and update user functionality. In this episode, you will learn how to fetch single user data from Laravel backend using REST API, how to pre-fill forms in React hook form by getting the API response, how to reuse the same form for create and edit functionality, how to send an update API request for updating the user data, and why passwords should not be populated in edit forms. So by the end of this episode, our update operation of CRUD will be completed. If you are enjoying this masterclass and learning something useful, make sure to subscribe to the channel and support the series so we can continue building this full stack application together. Now let's start building. So firstly, let's understand the update flow. So before writing the code, let me jump to the application first. And this is our application. So previously we created this users listing, create user with form validation, and here we handled client side and server side both validations. Now let's understand how edit operations work in CRUD applications. So the typical flow will be like this. We have this users listing. We have the action button as edit. So when we'll click on edit, this will open a form with this particular row data, and the data will be populated in that form. Now user will modify some values in that form and then will submit the update request to the backend. So the important step here is pre-filling the form with existing user data, right? So whenever we will click on edit, this will open a form, and in that form, this will populate the specified data. So that is exactly what we will implement in this today's episode. And for handling this, we will use one form for create and edit. So we already have this create user form, right? From here, we are creating a new user to the system. So using the same form, I will handle the edit functionality. Some developers create two different forms like create user or edit user, but that leads to duplicate code. And instead, we will use a single form component and detect the mode based on the route. Okay, so we will handle it like if form is opened in the create mode or in edit mode, and based on that only, we will reuse the same form component for create and edit. So this approach keeps our code simple and reusable. Now let's start with this edit functionality first. So firstly, I will add one on click event on this edit. So let's jump to the code editor, and I will jump to the users listing component. So here we fetched the users data, and this is our tabular layout. Here we have this edit button. Currently this is a button, so I will change this to link, and this link I will import from React router. Okay, this has imported. Now I will add two attribute so that I can specify one route on which this will redirect. So I will specify one route as dashboard/users, and here I want to specify the dynamic user ID, because every user has a different user ID. So when we'll click on this edit, we will pass the user ID in the URL, and based on that URL, we will fetch that user data from backend API. Okay. And after getting the response, we will populate that into the user form. So here I will pass the user ID. So for that, I will change this to backtick first, just like this. And I will wrap this in curly bracket. Okay. Now here I will pass the dynamic segment. So I will use $curly bracket and I will get the user ID just like this one. Now after this user ID, I will specify mode like edit. Okay, because later we will add view also. So this will help to identify the mode like view or edit. Okay. Now respectively, we will have to create this route in the app component. So here this is our public and protected routes added. Now similar to this, I will create one more route, and after this users, we have to pass the dynamic segment as, let's say, ID. Okay. And here we'll change this to edit, because here I have a specified ID/edit. So now we have the same route definition added here, and I want to render the same component as create user. So we have this create user component in which we have a form, and we handled the create user functionality from here using React hook form. So we used this register function provided by React form. We applied the client-side validation and also the server-side validation from API response. We have this submit button. Okay. Now in the same form, I want to handle the edit and update functionality. So firstly, let's verify our on-click event. So I will click on edit button, and yes, on edit, this redirected on a different URL as dashboard/users/ID, which is a dynamic ID/edit. If I'll go back, if I'll click on a different user, yes, we have different ID as 8 and respectively we have this 6. Okay. So this is working, and based on this, this has opened the same create user form component. Now here we have to receive this dynamic user ID. So let's navigate to the code editor, and for getting the user ID from the parameter, because this is URL parameter, right? So for getting this URL parameter, I will be using use params hook from React router. Okay. So firstly, let's use params hook. This is basically one function, and I will console it in order to check what is it returning. I will open the developer console in order to check the console response. Let me clear it first. I will refresh it, and yes, in the console, this returned ID, which is a segment, and the dynamic value as 6. And this 6 is coming from this URL. Now instead of 6, if we will have different value, that will be coming here. So we go to the ID, which is a dynamic segment, and this segment is defined here in the route. Now let's say if we'll change this to user ID, here we will get the user ID. So yes, when we changed that, we received the user ID, right? So ID is fine, like this is already a meaningful value, means we are getting the ID of users, and this is Users CRUD, right? So we received the user ID here. Now we have to extract this exact value from this use params. So for that, we will use object destructuring. So what I will do, I will define one variable as, let's say, ID, because we have to extract the ID from use params, right? So I have extracted this ID segment in this destructuring. So now we have the user ID, right? Now what I want, if we have ID as 6, then I want to set one flag as isEdit, because in create form we won't have the user ID, right? If I will navigate to the listing, if we'll click on create user, here we can see the URL is simplified as users/create. Here we don't have any ID in the URL parameter. So in order to identify the form is opened in the edit or create mode, I will use this ID, and this ID is coming from the parameter. So based on this, I will maintain one flag as isEdit. So let's define one variable as isEdit, and here I will check for this ID. If we have the ID, then I will set this to true, else it will be false. So instead of using any ternary operator like if we have ID then set this to true, else false, I will simply use a small annotation, just like I will use ID and I will typecast this to boolean. Okay, so in boolean function I have passed this ID. So when we will have ID, this will return true, else it will return false. Let's check it. isEdit. Let me clear this console first. I will click on edit. Yes, here this returned true. Now when I will click on create user, this returned false. So this is working expectedly. Now let's go ahead with handling this edit functionality. So we received the user ID and isEdit flag, right? So firstly, based on this ID, I have to make one API call to the backend, so that based on this ID, we will fetch the user data, and then we will have to populate the user data in this form. So firstly, let's handle it here. So what I will do, here I will use effect hook in order to trigger one API call based on the dependency. So we already discussed about React lifecycle event, right? In which we show how we can handle the React lifecycle in functional component using use effect hook. So I will define use effect hook here, and in this use effect, I will pass the dependency as this user ID. So whenever we will have the user ID, that time only this function will be invoked. Okay. Here I will trigger the API call. So inside this, I will use one if condition in order to check whether this isEdit is true or not. Okay, so if isEdit is true, then I will fetch the user data. So for getting the user data, I will define a function in this user service, because we have created this user service in order to separate out our code base. So all the business logic is written here related to users module. We have this get users, create users, and similarly I will create one more function as get single user data, right? So for this I will change this to get user, and here we'll have to pass the user ID and the token. Now in this URL parameter, we'll have to pass the user ID just like this. Okay, and rest I will update the message as failed to fetch user, and this will fetch the single user. This is done. Now let's copy this function and let's call it here. So in order to call this get user function, we have to import user service, and let's call it using user service.get user. Now in the first parameter, we have to pass this ID and this token. So we already received the token here using useAuth context. Okay, so we called this function, and in this function we made this API call to the Laravel backend side, and that will return the user data. And this get user function is a sync function. So this will return the promise. Okay. So let's handle it first. So I will use callback function using .then, and I will extract the response just like this. Now inside this, let's put console.log user, and I will display this response. Now this function should be triggered when we'll open this edit mode form. If we'll check the network response, let me refresh it first. I will navigate to the users listing. Okay, let me clear this console also, and I will click on edit. So on edit, this triggered one API call. If we'll check the network response, yes. Okay, but we don't have this API created yet in the backend side, so we will create that first. So let's navigate to the Laravel application. And here we have this user controller in which we handled this users listing, create user functionality. Now respectively, I will handle the user show functionality. So for that, I will use this function, and here I will use route model binding. So from the URL, we are already passing the user ID, right? If we'll jump to the terminal in order to check the route list for the user model, I will type PHP artisan route list. And for the get request, we have this API /users/user, right? So this user is basically user ID, and we already used route model binding. So whenever we will pass the ID, this will fetch the user data automatically by binding it with model. So here we should receive the user data. So we will have to return this response directly. So I will use try block and this catch one also. Okay. Now in this try block, we have to return the JSON response. So I will copy this. I will paste it here, and I will change this status code to 200, and the message will be like user fetched successfully. And in the data, this will return the data by binding it with the user model directly. We don't have to query to the user model. Now let's jump to the browser, and here in the network call, this made this API call and this returned the status as 200. If we'll check the preview, yes, we received the response as data, message, and success as true. Okay, and this returned the user ID 10 and this, and we requested for the same user ID 10. If we'll go back, if we'll click on another user, and if we'll check, yes, from this request, this passed the user ID as 8, and in the preview, this returned the user data for the same user having ID as 8. Now if we'll navigate to the console tab, here in the JSON response, we received the user data correctly. Now from here, we have to extract the name and email, and we'll populate in this form. Okay, I want to populate only two fields like full name and email. Regarding the password, we won't expose the password from the backend to the front-end side because that is a security risk. Okay, so here we will just hide these two fields in edit mode. These two fields will be enabled only for the create mode. So let's populate the form first. So I will jump to the React application, and after getting the console response, I will set this user data in state. So for handling the edit form, the React use form hook provides one function. Okay, so I will jump to the official documentation of React hook form. Here in this use form, this provides one function as reset. So this reset function will reset the form state and its values. That means this function allows us to set form values dynamically. So we have to pass the values inside this. Here this will take object. Okay, so we have to pass the value in the key and value format. So let's set the incoming API response values using this reset function to the form state so that this form will be auto-populated. So here I will use reset function, and firstly we will have to import it. So here I will use reset from use form. Okay, this has been imported and let's use it as a function. Now inside this I will create one object, and here we have to specify the key and value. So the key should be same as exactly whatever we have used while registering the input field, right? So for the first input field, which is name, we registered as full name. So while setting the value also, we will have to use the same key full name so that this will match this key with this input field name. And here this will populate that value. Same thing for email. We used key as email while registering this input field. So we have this form state, right? And here we will set the key and value. So the first key I will set as full name for name field, and in this we will set the value from the API response, which is coming as name. So we will get it using response.name. Next, I want to set email, and this is coming from response.email itself. This is done. Here, set API response values to the form state. Let's remove this console. This is not needed. And this one also. Let's save it. Let's navigate to the browser. And yes, when we set the value, this has populated here in the form. This is working. Now I want to change this title to update form, also this button title, and I want to hide these two fields for the edit. So let's handle these two things. So we have used this isEdit variable as a flag, right? I will use this here. So I will apply ternary operator. If isEdit, then I will change this title to update, else it will be create. Okay. Next, here for hiding this password and confirm password field, I will use the same ternary operator condition. So I will use isEdit. If we have isEdit, then we have to hide it. So I will use not condition. If we don't have isEdit, then only this will display. So let's close it here. And we will have to wrap it in a parent element, but I will use empty fragment here. Just like this. Okay. So I have used condition as if not isEdit, then only this will display this password and confirm password field. Let's update this button title. So again, I will use if we have isEdit, then change the title to update, else it will be create. And I will close this. Let's save it and navigate to the browser. And yes, we have this title update user, this button as update user, and those password fields are hidden now. So this is working. Now we have to work on the update functionality. So we have already this submit function, right? If we'll scroll to top, here we already have this form on submit handler as handle submit, and we called this submit form function. And currently this is handling a single operation for creating the user only. Now in the same form, I have to handle two operations, update and create also. So previously it was written for create user only, Now we will change this to handle both. So here I will use one condition. If this is age edit, then we have to handle update functionality here. Else this will handle this create functionality. Okay. So I will just duplicate this function. I will paste it here, and we have to change this to, let's say, update user. We will have to create this function in the user service. And for updating the user data, we need user ID alongside the form data and token also. So I will pass one more parameter as ID, and this ID is already coming from this const ID variable, which is coming from use params. So now let's define this function in the user service. So here I'll simply replicate this function. I will paste it. I will change this to update user, and this should be create a user. This is creating a single user at a time. And let's update this function name as update user. And from this function, we passed 3 parameters like ID, data, and token. So let's capture it in the same way, ID, data, and token. Now for updating the user data, I will change this method to put, because we are using REST API and we have to follow the same architecture, right? So now for the put request, we have the route endpoint as API/users/ID. So let's define this. So here we will have to pass the user ID. Okay, this is done. And we already changed this method to put. So rest, we don't have to do anything. This will work. Now let's navigate to the Laravel backend side. And here we will create this update function. So from this API request, we will be getting the name and email. So firstly, we will have to validate it. So let's add the form validation here. So I will use request validate function. And we already added the validation here at the top. So let's copy and paste it here. From the form, we are sending 2 fields data only, name and email. So we will validate those fields only. And while updating the user data, we have to change this unique email field. This should not check for the current user. So let's add email dot, and we will have to check with the current user email. So firstly, let's change this to route model binding using user model, and I will use user ID. So this won't check for the current user. Rest it will check email uniqueness for different user. Let's get the validated data here. And after getting the validated data, let's update this user. So firstly, let's use this try catch block. And in the try block, we will update the user. So I will use user model update function directly. Now inside this update function, let's define one array. Okay. And inside this array, I will pass key as name, because in the users table, we have the field as name. And this I will get it from validated array full name key. Next we have email. So let's update it from validated email. This is done. Now after updating, let's return this success response. So I will return JSON response as user updated successfully. And in the data, we will return the user data. Now let's navigate to the browser. Let me clear this console and network logs, and I will change the name to Akash KM. Also this email, I will click on update, and yes, this has updated the user and redirected back to the users listing. So this update functionality is working correctly. Let's update this second user, Max. Let's update it. This thrown one validation error as full name must be at least 5 characters long. So I will quickly update it. And yes, this has updated this user. So we have successfully finished this edit and update user functionality. And in this episode, we learned how to fetch a single user from Laravel backend, pre-fill forms using React hook form using reset function, reuse the same form for create and edit functionality. We send update request to the backend for updating the user data, and we followed proper security practices for password. So in edit mode, we have not exposed the password to the front end and we are not updating it. When we will need to update the password, we will create a separate form, and from there only we will be able to change our password. So with this, we have completed create, read and update functionality. In the next episode, we will finish the CRUD module by implementing the delete user feature, and we will also add a confirmation dialog for better user experience. So if you found this episode helpful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel and support this masterclass series so we can keep building this full stack application together. Hi everyone, welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana and you are watching the React 19 full stack masterclass series. In the previous episodes, we built the Users CRUD module step by step. So far in this series, we have implemented users listing, create user form, form validation using React hook form library, edit and update user functionality. And at this point, our application supports create, read and update functionality for the user module. But every CRUD system needs the final operation as delete. So in today's episode, we are going to implement the delete user feature. But instead of using the basic browser confirmation dialog, we will build a beautiful reusable confirmation dialog using Tailwind CSS. So this dialog component will be reusable across our entire application for any destructive action. So if you are enjoying this masterclass series and learning something useful, make sure to subscribe to the channel and support this series. Now let's start building. So I will quickly jump to the application. And here we have this users module listing. Now before implementing the delete functionality, let's understand the delete flow first. So here from this users listing, we have this action button as delete. When we'll click on this delete button, one confirmation dialog will appear. And from that confirmation dialog, when we will confirm, that will send the delete request to the backend using REST API. And after getting the API response from the server side, we will update the UI and we will filter out that record from this users listing for that deleted user. So the confirmation step is important because deleting data is destructive. And without confirmation, users could accidentally delete important records. So firstly, we will start from Laravel backend side, and there we will create one REST API for deleting the user. So let's jump to the Laravel application. And here this is our user controller. Lastly, we created this update function for updating the user. Next, I will create this delete function. So inside this destroy function, I will define the functionality to delete the user. So in this function parameter, I will change this string ID to route model binding. So I will use user model and its instance. Now we will be getting the user data based on the given ID. So directly I will delete the user using this model delete function. And after deleting it, I will return the success response. So that I will copy it from here and I will paste it. I will update the message as user deleted successfully, and here we don't have to return any user data. Now I will wrap this in try catch block. So I will copy it from here and I will paste it. Let's save it. And for this function, we don't have to define any special route because we already used this API resource function that will create all the resource route for this user module. Now from the backend side, we are done with the APIs. Now let's consume this API in the frontend side. So let's navigate to the React application again. And here, as per this UI, firstly, we'll add one on-click event on this delete button. So here we have this users listing component, right? And I will scroll down to the listing. Here we have the action buttons. Okay, we have this edit and delete button as of now. So on delete, I want to open one confirmation dialog, and after confirming from that dialog, only we will delete that selected user. So instead of using JavaScript confirm dialog, we will create our custom dialog component using tailwind CSS, and later we will reuse that across our React application. So here, firstly, I will define one on click event. Okay. And I will simply check one alert as confirm. I will click on delete. Yes, this click is working. Now let's create one component as confirm dialog. So that will be our reusable component basically. So later when we will create other modules in our application, then we will reuse that confirmation dialog. So inside source components, here we have one folder as UI. So I'm going to create one component inside this UI folder itself because that will be like UI component and we will reuse across our project. So inside this, I will create one component as, let's say, confirm dialog.jsx. Now let's quickly create the function component inside this. So I will define const confirm dialog and I will use this arrow function and let's export it. Now inside this function, I will return the JSX. So I have the layout ready. I will quickly paste that layout. Okay, so I have pasted this layout using tailwind CSS. I have created one div and I set the classes as position fixed so that it will just overlap on top of the parent element. Okay, so I have set this position div in set 0 and I have used the flex classes. Also for this background transparent, I used background black of 40 and I set the Z index. Next, I have added one warning icon. Okay, so I have used this SVG code. Next, I have one heading 2 component in which I added one title as, let's say, are you sure? You can set any title. We have one paragraph element just in order to show the message like you want to delete or something. And next we have these two buttons as cancel and delete. Now, firstly, I will render this component in order to show you the exact UI. So I will jump to this users listing component and here I will render that component after this table layout. Okay. So I will call confirm dialog component here. Now I will jump to the browser and this is our confirmation dialog. So our component design is done. Now we have to handle the actions like cancel and delete functionality. And before that, we have to open this confirmation dialog on this table listing action button, which is delete. Currently I have rendered it by default. So firstly we have to hide it, and once we'll click on any of the delete button from this users listing table, then this confirmation dialog will appear. So let's maintain one state to hide and show this confirmation dialog component. So here in this users listing component itself, I will maintain one state in order to open and close of that confirmation dialog. So basically that will work as hide and show. So I will define one state variable as, let's say, const dialog open, and respectively I will define the function as set dialog open, and I will use state hook, and the initial state I will set it as false. So I have defined this boolean value here. Now based on this dialog open state, I will render that component. So firstly, I will pass this dialog open state to this confirm dialog component as a props. So I will set one props as open, and I will pass this prop as dialog open, which is containing this state as boolean true and false. So when this dialog open is false, by default that confirmation dialog should not render. When it is true, then that component should be rendered. Now let's receive this prop in that component. So I will jump to this confirm dialog, and here I will receive that prop as open, and also I will initialize it with false. Now here I will add one condition. If this open is not true, then I won't return this JSX from here. Instead I will return null. So I have set one condition. If not open, then return null. If open is true, then return this JSX. Now by default this component won't be rendered. Now let's show it by clicking on this delete button. So firstly, on this button click, I will set this to true. So here on this on click, I will use this set dialog open to true. So from this on click, I have set the dialog open to true. So now if I will refresh and if we'll click on any of the delete button, yes, our confirmation dialog is rendered, right? Now same thing, when we'll click on this cancel button, this confirmation dialog should be disappeared. So let's add one more on click event on this cancel button. So this cancel button is added in the confirm dialog component itself here, right? So from here, I will add on click event, but our state is defined in its parent component as users listing, right? And here we called this confirmation dialog component. So this dialog open state cannot be modified from this confirm dialog directly. So for handling that, I will pass one function as a prop from this users listing component to this confirm dialog component. So here I will define one function as on cancel. This is basically one prop, and I will pass one event directly. So here I will set this set dialog open to false. Okay, either you can define a separate function for making this state to false, else we can set this directly here and we can pass this as a prop. Now let's receive this prop here in this confirm dialog component. So after this, I have received on cancel, and I will initialize it with empty function. Now I will call this on cancel function in this on click event of this cancel button. Okay, this is done. Now let's jump to the browser in order to check it. Let's refresh it. Let me click on any of this delete button. The confirmation dialog has been appeared, and let's try to click on this cancel button. So on cancel, this confirmation dialog got closed. So this is working. Now let's go ahead with this delete functionality. So on confirm delete, we have to delete the user. And before that, we have to identify which user is going to be deleted, right? So we have to find that user ID, means we have to just store that user ID which is going to delete from this listing. So on click of this delete button from this table, firstly we have to capture the current row, meaning selected user ID. So what I will do, instead of setting this dialog open directly from this on click, I will take it one more step ahead, and firstly I will cut it from here and I will define one function as delete user, just like this. Okay, and in this I will pass this current user ID. Now let's define this function at the top. So here I will define const delete user. Okay, and here we will receive that user ID, right? This is delete user function. Now here we will receive that user ID. Now after getting that user ID, I will set this user ID into the state variable. So here at the top, I will define one more variable as const selected user ID, and the function will be like set selected user ID, and I will initialize it with null. Okay. Now here in this delete function, I will set the ID to this selected user ID state. So I will use this function as set selected user ID, and I will pass the current ID in this. Thereafter, we will open that dialog. So I will set dialog open to true from here. So initially, when we will click on this delete button, this will trigger this function as delete user, and we already passed the current user ID in this function. This will receive the ID, and this will set that ID in this state variable in order to identify which user is going to be deleted. And then I have opened that confirmation dialog. So I have just set this state to true. Now let's put one console in order to check the selected user ID. Now let's jump to the browser and let's open the developer console. Let me clear it. And here, let's click on delete button. Yes. So on click, this performed two actions. Firstly, this set the user ID in the state variable, and this opened this confirmation dialog also. If we'll cancel and let's click on this different user. Yes, now we have the different user ID, right? So this is working. Now based on this selected user ID, we will proceed for the deletion of the user. So for that, we have to perform the confirmation action handler using this delete button. So we will have to perform one more click event on this final confirmation delete button, right? Because this initial delete button is just prompting this confirmation dialog, and from here, when we will confirm, then only this will perform the deletion for the selected user. So let's add one more click event, but this click event will be added again on this confirm dialog component in this confirm button. But again, we have the same thing, like we are having the selected user ID in its parent component, right? And we have called this confirm dialog component here as a child component. So again, we cannot access this state directly in that confirm dialog without using prop. And instead of passing the selected user, better just pass one delete function from here so that our business logic for deleting the user will be written in the same component. Because anyhow, this confirm dialog component is just a reusable component. So here we cannot write the business logic specific to module. Currently we have just implemented it for the user module. Now let's say later we will implement this for blog post or different module. Then here we cannot write all the business logic based on the module. So better to write their business logic in their specific module component itself, and this common component will be reusable. So again we will pass one more prop just in order to perform the confirm delete, right? So here I will pass one more prop as on confirm. Okay, and on confirm I will pass one function as confirm delete. I will define this function here, but before that let's receive these props in this confirm dialog component, and let's initialize it with empty function. Now I will call this on confirm function here on this on click event. Let's save it and let's define this function confirm delete in this users listing component. So here I will define delete confirmation, okay, const confirm delete, and in this function we will perform the delete operation by making one API call. So from here we will pass the selected user ID to the backend API, and that API will delete the user from the database that we already created one API in the Laravel side. So after getting the response, we will just refresh this listing. So here we have to delete the user. Now for deleting the user and making the API call, I will write that logic in our user service. So I have already created this user service for handling all the business logic related to user module, right? So just similar to this, I will create one more function. So let's copy it and paste it here. This is for delete user. I will change the function name as delete user. And for deleting the user, only I need user ID and token. So the endpoint will be same like API URL, which is base URL users/id. Only we have to change the method to delete. And in the body, we won't need to pass any data. Now let's call this function in this confirm delete function. So here I will call user service dot delete user, and in this function I will pass the selected user ID alongside auth token. Okay, delete user function, and this delete user function is async function, so we have to make it as await, and here we used await, so I will have to make this function to async. This is done. Now let's quickly wrap this code in the try catch block. So I will move it in try block, and in the catch I will use error object, and I will console the error because currently we don't have any toast component. So here only I will display the error. And also I will use the finally block. I will set that dialog open to false, so that our confirmation dialog will be closed after performing the delete operation. And also we have to clear the selected user ID state. So I will set it to null after deleting the user. This is done. Now after deleting the user, we have to refresh our users listing so that the deleted user should not appear in this listing. Now we can handle it in two ways. Either we can refresh the entire user listing by making API call, and that we have this function as fetch users, and we can refetch the fresh list from the database. Or in the second way, only we can filter out that user from this state that we already set using this set users function. So we have already defined this state as users, right? And in the same state, the users listing data is stored. So instead of making the another API call for refreshing the users listing, I will simply filter out that particular user data from this users state. And then I will set that updated list to this state variable. So let's go with this second approach. I won't refresh this users listing by making the API call. Instead, I will simply refresh the users listing state. So here I will use the filter function. Okay. So firstly, we have to filter the users listing, and we have to set this in the same state. So I will use shorthand as set users. So in this set users, firstly, I will get the previous users, okay, like current users in this listing. And then I will filter out using filter function, and let's extract the user. Now here I will just check if the current user ID not equals selected user ID. Okay, then this will display those users. Now let's remove this console, and here let's check this component. Yeah, we have passed open, on cancel, and on confirm, right? Now let's navigate to the browser and let's click on delete. Yes. So this confirm dialog is opened. Now let's click on this delete confirm. And yes, that user got deleted. If we'll check the network response for the API call, here this triggered that user delete API. And here we have this request method as delete user ID 10. And in the preview, this returned success as user deleted successfully, and that user ID 10 has been removed, means filtered out from this state, and this is not displaying here in this users listing. Even if I will refresh it, yes, from this users listing API, that user is not coming now. We have total 9 records, right? So user delete functionality is working expectedly. Now we will enhance this confirm dialog. So we will pass these two texts dynamically from this component itself, because anyhow this confirm dialog will not longer be available only for the users module. We will reuse it for different modules as well. So here we have to pass some dynamic text and message. So this is title and this is our message. So I will capture it using dynamic variable, which will be basically props, and at the top I will receive it. So I will define title, and I will set some initial title just like are you sure, and message as, let's say, you want to delete this item. Now let's pass these two props from this users listing component. From here we called this confirm dialog component. So I will pass title as delete user, okay, and let's say message as are you sure you want to delete this user. We can extend this like this action cannot be undone. Okay, you can pass any meaningful message based on the module. Now, if I'll jump to the browser, if we'll click on delete, yes, we have that dynamic message coming as delete user. This is headline. And here we have this message as, are you sure you want to delete this user? This action cannot be undone. If we'll cancel it, this has not performed any API call, and here this user is not deleted. Click on delete, and if we'll confirm it, yes, that user got deleted again. So using this way, we have handled the delete functionality with this confirm dialog. So in this episode, we implemented the delete user functionality with this confirmation dialog. Now our users module supports the full CRUD cycle, which is create, read, update, and delete. We also built a reusable confirmation dialog using Tailwind CSS, which we can reuse across our application. In the next episode, I will add the missing view functionality also, so that we will have one separate action in order to display the user detail. And we will enhance our UI by adding the common and beautiful toast message component for displaying the success or error message. Currently, we don't have any message displaying for any action like user created, updated, or deleted. So for that, we will add one toast message. And further, we will continue expanding the dashboard by building more modules and features. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and support this masterclass series. So once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to React 19 Full Stack Masterclass series. I'm Umesh Rana. In the previous episode, we completed the Users CRUD module where we implemented the delete user functionality with a reusable confirmation dialog. Now in this episode, we are going to add two important features that are commonly used in real production applications. First, we will implement a view user page where we can see the details of a specific user. And second, we will build a reusable custom toast notification system using React context. And for styling, we will use Tailwind CSS and hero icons. As of now, for toast, I'm not going to use any third-party libraries like React Toastify. We will build our own toast component from scratch, which is a great way to understand how reusable UI components work in React applications. So let's get started. And by the end of this episode, we will have a view button in the users listing, a view user page to display user details, a reusable toast component, a toast contacts to manage global notifications, and a toast messages for actions just like create, update, and delete. So this will significantly improve the user experience of our dashboard. So let's first go to our users listing component. So firstly, I will show you the UI. Here we have this users listing in which we have the action button as edit and delete. Now similarly, I will add one more button as view. So our edit and delete functionality is already working. Okay. Now I will add one more button as view in the same users listing component. So let's jump to the code editor. And here we have this users list component. If I will scroll down, here we have this users listing and we have the action buttons. So similar to this edit and delete, I will add one more button as view. So I will simply duplicate this link. I will change this label to view. And here I will change the Tailwind classes like BG Sky 700. And I will update this route as dashboard/users/user ID. I don't need this /edit in view mode. Now I will jump to the browser. And yes, our view button is displayed here. Now let's create one route in order to handle this click event. So I have already added this link component and two attribute. So we have specified this route, right? Now we will have to define this route in the app component. So let's jump to this app component, and similar to this edit route, I will create one more route as dashboard slash users, and we have this ID as segment, and this will render a different component. So for showing the user detail, I will create one more component because we have to display the user details in the read-only mode. There won't be any form, there won't be any edit operation on that. So currently we have this create user component for handling create and update functionality, and we have users list component. So in the users folder itself, I will create one more component as view user.jsx. Now inside this, quickly I will create one function component. So I will define const view user, and from here I will return JSX. So I will copy this top layout from create user form itself. I will copy this heading and title. Okay. And let me close this div, and I will change this title as user details. Now let's export this component from here. Okay. Now firstly I will render this component in this routing. So instead of this create user, I will render that view user component from this view user. Now I will jump to the browser and I will click on view. So yes, this user details component has been rendered successfully. Now here we have to display the user details based on the user ID. So we are getting the user ID in the URL params. So firstly we have to receive that user ID in this view user component. So before return, I will capture that ID using use params hook, and this use params hook is provided by React router. So I will capture that ID as ID, and I will put console.log ID in order to verify whether I'm getting ID or not. So I'll check the console, and yes, I'm getting that ID as 9. Now from here, after getting the ID, we have to make one API call to the backend Laravel side, so that based on this given ID, we will fetch the current user detail. Okay. So in the user service, we already have one function created as get user, which is taking user ID and token as a parameter. And then in the response, this will return that user detail. So I will use the same function and I will call it here. So we have to call this function in the use effect, so that when this component will be mounted, we will have the user detail. So in the dependency, I will pass this ID, okay, user ID basically. And here I will call that function as get user. And this get user function is defined in the user service. So firstly, we have to import that user service here. Import user service from user service. And I will call this function as user service dot get user. And this function is a sync function, right? So here I will have to handle it. In the use effect, I won't use await because this is not a function, right? So instead I will use this callback as dot and then, and here I will get the user data just like this. Now I will put console.log this user detail, and in this get user function we have to pass the ID and auth token. So that auth token we will get it using use auth context. We have this custom hook, and I will extract the token from there. Now let's pass this token here. Now let's save and jump to the browser. And yes, here we received the user detail of that given user ID. Now after getting the user detail, let's set that user detail in one state variable. So I will maintain one state as user and the function will be like set user. And let's initialize it with null. And here I will use this set user function in order to set this user detail, which is coming from API response. Now in this return, we have to display the user detail, which is coming from the API response. So after this heading, I will create one more div, and inside this, I will render the detail like name, and we have to display the name from user.name. Let's verify it. And yes, the name has been displayed here. Here I will make it bold. So this is label basically, right? Now let's replicate this paragraph element. And next I will display the email. And this will be captured from user.email. Next I will display the created at date. And here we have the field as created at from backend API response. This one, right? But this date format is not in human readable format. So let's parse it using new date function. So here I will use new date function, and in this date function I will pass this created at date field, and then I will use to local data string function, else I will display it as empty string. Let's save it and let's jump to the browser. And yes, now this date field is displayed in the human readable format. Now I'll give some spaces between these fields. So here in this parent div, I will set class as space y, let's say 3. Yes, now we have the enough spaces. Now here at the top, I will add one condition. If not user, that means if you don't have the user, then I will return, let's say, loading text. Currently I have not implemented the loader, and that I will implement it in upcoming episodes. So now if I will refresh it, yes, we have this user details coming. If I'll go back and I'll click on different user view details, this fetched that user details. And for the easy convenience, I will add one back button here at the top right corner so that we can redirect to the users listing component directly. So let's create one more component, and again it will be like some reusable component, and that we can use it in view details, edit details, and also in the create user form, right? So let's create one reusable component. Inside SRC components, we have one UI folder, right? So inside this UI folder, I will create one back button. So I will name it as backbutton.jsx. Now I will quickly create one function component inside this. So I will define const backButton, and from here I will return one button. Okay, and I will name it as back, but I want this label to be captured dynamically, so better to receive it via props. So I will capture it as label, and here I will initialize it with some initial value as back, and I will render this variable here. Now I will style this button, so I will add some tailwind classes as, let's say, padding x 3, padding y, let's say 1.5, border, and I will set the border color as gray 300, and on hover I will set BG gray as 100, rounded, and also cursor pointer. So this will have one transparent button. Let me export it first, and then I will render this component in the view user component. So here, just after this heading, I will render that back button component. I will save it and I'll jump to the browser. I will jump to the users listing, view user, and here we have this back button rendered. Now I want to align this back button to the right side. So for this, I will add some classes in the parent. So here I will add one div with classes like flags and justify between. I will wrap this heading and back button in this div. Let's check now. And yes, this back button is visible here. And let's add some margin from bottom in this div, like margin bottom as 4. So I will remove this margin from the heading and I have added in this div itself. Now let's check, and yes, this is perfect. Now here we have to set some redirection URL. So when we'll click on back button, this should redirect to the previous URL, right? So I will jump to the back button, and here we have to redirect to the previous URL. So for redirecting it, I will use navigate hook from React router, and let's initialize it as navigate. Now I will call this navigate on this button click, and I will use this navigate function, and in this navigate function I have to redirect to the previous URL, right? So that I can pass it as -1. So in the browser history, this will just redirect to the previous URL from the history stack. Okay, let's save it and let's jump to the browser. Let me clear these console errors, and if I'll click on back, yes, this redirected to the users listing. If I'll click on view, again if I'll go back, yes, this came back to the users listing. Now in the next step, we will be working on the custom toast component. So as of now, for any action like create, update, and delete, we don't have any toast message displaying here in order to identify whether the action was successful or not, right? So let's create one toast component. So let's jump to the code editor, and here in the UI folder itself, I will create one component as toast.jsx. Now I will quickly create one function component, const toast. Okay, and here I will return some JSX. So I will create one layout, and here I will pass some classes like flags, and I will set the width like 360 px for that toast, background white, rounded XL, and let's add some shadow with overflow as hidden. Now inside this, I will create one more div in order to have some left border on the toast. So I will add one class like width 1.5. So we will have this left border, and next we need toast content. So in the toast content, we have to display one icon and text message, right? So for this, I will create one div with some classes like flags, items, a start, and I will set gap as 3 and padding as 4, width full, and here I need to display some icon. So I will use hero icon in this. I will come to this part later. Firstly, I'll just define one empty div. And next, here we have to display the text of the toast content. So I will wrap this in one more div. And in this, I will create one paragraph element. And here we need to display the toast title and message. Now we will style it. So I will use classes like font, semi-bold, text, gray as 800. Okay. And for the message, I will use class like text sm, text gray 500. And we need to display the title at the top, and just below that we will display the message. So for that I will use flags property and items center. Let's save it, and firstly let's export it from here. Now in order to display this toast, we have to render that. So in order to check it, firstly I will render this component directly in the users listing. So I will import this toast component. I will jump to the browser, and here this is rendering, but we have to render this toast at the top right corner here, just in this header section. Okay, so that we will handle it in the context. Currently I have just designed the basic toast here, and rest I will handle this position with this container using toast context. So next I will create one context so that we don't have to call this toast component everywhere. Instead, I will call it globally, and I will wrap that provider in the app component itself for all the routes, so that our toast component will be rendered commonly for every components, and we don't need to call that everywhere just like this. I have just shown you in order to check whether the component is rendering or not. Okay. So now we will create one context similar to auth context. So inside components, we have this context folder. And here I will create one more context as, let's say, toast context.jsx. Now here I will create one context as, let's say, toast context itself. And I will use create context from React. Now from here I will create one provider, and I will export this provider. So I will use export const toast provider, and here I will have to render the children, and I will return some JSX from here. So inside this return statement, firstly we have to return the provider. So I will use toast context dot provider, and we have to expose some value. So I want to expose one function from here in order to display that toast, so that we can call that function in every components wherever we need that toast. So here firstly I will render this children, and here we have to render the toast component. So based on the scenarios, we can have the multiple toasts at a time, meaning we can have multiple actions like created, updated, or deleted together, right? And we will have to handle those all in the form of array. So in simple word, we can have multiple toasts at a time, and we have to display those all toasts together. So for handling that, firstly I will create one state variable as toasts and set toasts, and I will initialize it with empty array. Now after that I will create one function as const show toast. So I want to expose this function. So I will call this function here as value, so toast. And in this function, I will capture a few parameter. Let's say message, type, and I will set some initial value as success. So wherever I will call this toast component, I will call this function, and from there I will pass some dynamic parameter like message and type. Because in the toast component, we have to render the title, message, right? So this will be dynamic based on the actions. So here we have captured the message and type. Now inside this function, I will define some dynamic titles. So here we have to display the titles, let's say success or error in this way, okay? So that we will define it here in the context itself based on the action type. So I will define one object as titles, and inside this I will define some key and value. So if key is success, then its value will be like success. Similarly for error, I will set it for info and warning also. Okay, this is done. Now here I will use this function as set toast, so that we can set the multiple toasts in this state array. So I will call this set toast function, and in this we can have the previous toast also, right? So we have to keep that also. We don't have to remove that. And for that, I will use a spread operator in order to display the previous toast. And also we have to push the new toast as a state. And we have to set the title as this titles of type. So in this object, we have defined key and value, and this key will be coming dynamically as type, so that we can extract it from here. Next, I will pass message and type also. Now after this children, I will render that toast. So firstly, I will create one div of the toast wrapper, because here in the toast component, we have not created any wrapper. So that's why that toast was rendering at the bottom side, right? So here in the context itself, I will set the position of the parent wrapper as position fixed. From top, I will set as 5, right as 5, and I will set the flex and flex column property so that the toast content will be rendered in the same column. And next I will add some gap as 4 and JAD index as 50. Now inside this, I will have to render the toast component just like this. But we can have multiple toasts, so that's why we defined one state variable of array, and here we set the multiple toasts, right? So here we have to iterate that toast. Then I will use toast.map function, and let's capture this toast. Okay, and inside this loop itself, I will render this toast, so that if we will have multiple toasts in the array, those all toasts will be rendered here. And we will pass a few dynamic parameters, because in the toast we need to display title, message, right? So let's capture title, message, and type also. Okay, so in the type, by default I will set it as success, and if needed we can define one on close event of that toast also. Now let's pass these props. So here I will pass title, and this title will be coming from toast.title, message as toast, not toast, this should be toast dot message, type as toast dot type, right? And here I will pass on close event also. So on close, I will define one function, let's say remove toast. So while removing the toast, we have to pass some ID because we cannot remove all the toasts together. Only the clicked toast will be removed. So initially I will define one ID. So I need this dynamic ID that I will generate it using date.now function. And let's pass this ID as a key of every toast and also in this remove toast function, or better we can set it in this object itself. So I will get it as toast.id. Now let's define this function as remove toast here. Okay, and let's capture this ID. Now inside this, we have to remove the toast from this state. So I will use set toasts function, and we have to filter that toast based on the ID. So I will use dot filter function, and in this, let's say I have this toast as t. So I will check the current toast ID not equals to incoming ID. Then this will filter those toasts. So this is done. Now from here we have to return one hook as, let's say, export const use toast, and here I will use this use context, and inside this use context function I will pass this toast context. So we are returning this toast context provider. Now let's capture this toast context provider and let's render it in the app component. So we will have to wrap the entire routes, meaning all the components, in that toast, but we have to make sure this should be added after auth. Okay, so I will use toast provider here, and I will close it before closing of this auth provider. Now let's try to render that toast component. So we already exposed one function as show toast, and we have exposed this use toast hook. So we will use this show toast function using this custom hook. So firstly, let's test it in the update function. So I will jump to the create user component, and here we have this submit form, this update function, right? Here I will use toast in order to check it. So firstly, we have to import that use toast hook. So I will use toast from toast context, and from here we have to extract that function. So I will use show toast function. Now I will call this function show toast here, and in this function we have to pass a few parameters like message and type, right? So let's pass one static message as, let's say, updated, and the type as success. Now let's jump to the browser, and I will try to update this user. Yes. So here we can see toast component has been rendered successfully, but we have to render the dynamic message. So let's render these props here. We have to render this title and message. Okay. Yes, this dynamic text are rendering properly here. Now let's style this toast little bit more. So I will enhance this by adding some classes. So here I will define one object as, let's say, a styles, and in this I will define a few classes based on the type. So let's say if type is success, then I will define a few classes like border, and the class will be like border green, 500. I will set the icon background BG green 100. Icon color text green like 600, and I'll copy it and paste it for other type as error. And in this I will set the color as BG red and text red. Next I will add it for info. So in the info I will set the color like BG blue and blue. Lastly I will set for warning. So in the warning I will set BG yellow. Okay, this is done. Now I will pass this styles dynamically here in this layout. So firstly we have to set this in this left border. So let's pass this class dynamically. So I will use backtick first, and here we have to get this style based on the incoming type. So let's extract a style from this styles object by passing the type. Okay, now here let's pass this style directly. So we need to pass the border here. Okay, style dot border, because this is left border. And in this div I will render the icon. So firstly I will style it by adding some classes: flags, items center, justify center. I will set width and height as 8. I will make it rounded full, and here I will pass that icon BG color. So let's convert this to backtick. So I will use a style dot icon BG, and in this div I will render the icon. So I will use a span class, and here we have to render the icon. And for rendering the icon I will be using hero icon. So till now if we'll check our output, yes, this is rendering like this, and in this placeholder I will render the hero icons. So for getting that, firstly let's jump to the hero icons React. So we have this command. Okay, so let's copy this command and jump to the terminal, and in the React application I will paste it, and I will install it using bun. Okay, so the hero icons has been installed in this React project. Now we have to search for the hero icons. So let's jump to the official documentation of hero icons, and here based on the type we will have to get the icon. So for success I will get the checkmark icon, this one. Okay, so let's import these icons in the toast component. So here at the top I will import a few icon, just like import check circle icon from hero icons React 16 solid. And after importing this icon, here in this styles object itself I will pass the icon. So I will create one more key as icon, and I will render that check circle icon here as a component, and I will pass classes like width as 6, height as 6, and text green as let's say 600. Okay, now we have to render this icon here. So I will use a style dot icon. Now if we'll jump to the browser, and yes, this checkmark icon has been rendered successfully. So by using this way we will import some more icons. So next I will import information circle icon, exclamation triangle icon, and also X circle icon. Okay. Now respectively, I will pass these all in every other object. So here for the error, I will pass X circle icon. Okay. And this color will be changed as red. And for the info, I will render this information circle icon, and this will be blue. For the warning, I will render this triangle icon with yellow. This is done. And here we received one more prop as on close. So I will add one more icon for closing that toast. So here I will create one button, and I will use that close icon here. So for close circle, I will use this X circle icon directly. I will set height and width in this. I will remove this text green classes and I will make it 8. And on this button on click, I will call that on close function. This is done. Let's jump to the browser and let's try to update user one more time. Yes, we have this icon. Let's reduce this height and width. Let's make it 6 only. Yes, this is perfect. And I will set some classes like cursor, pointer on this. Okay. If we'll click on this, that toast got closed. If we'll update one more time, yeah. So now here we have to render the dynamic message, right? So let's jump to the create user component, and instead of this static message, I will call the dynamic message here. So I will have to receive this response from update user function, which is defined in the user service. So if we'll check the update user function, here we returned the result, right? So we will capture the response from there only. So let's capture the response as, let's say, response. And same thing for this create also. And I will cut this toast and I will keep it after this if else condition. So here we have to pass the message. So I will pass response dot message, which is coming dynamically. And we have to define this here with null. Okay. Let's remove this let. And if we'll come back to the browser, if we'll check the network response, if we'll update any user, after updating that, here in this API, we got the message and success as true and false. So here we have to pass this success or error based on the condition. So what I will check? I will check if response dot success is there, right? This success. If it is true, then we will pass success, else error. This is done. Now the same toast I will pass in the user delete function. So let's copy this so toast function. Let's jump to the users list. Let's remove this toast component first. And here we have this confirm delete function. So here let's call that function. And let's capture the response as response. And we'll have to call this show toast from that use toast function. Okay, this is done. And let's check this delete user function inside user service. So instead of data, we have to return the result only so that we will get the status and response message. So this is done. If we'll jump to the browser, let me refresh it. Okay. Firstly, I will try to update the user. Yes, user updated and this returned back here. Now I will try to delete one user. So yes, user deleted successfully, but this toast is not closing automatically. I have to close it manually, right? So for that, I will add one auto close functionality inside toast context. So here I will add set timeout function, and inside this I will call the remove toast function. Okay, and we'll pass the ID, the same ID, and I want to remove the toast after 3000 millisecond, which is 3 seconds. Now the toast will be auto closed after 3 seconds. Now let's jump back to the browser. Let's try to update any user. And let's wait for 3 seconds. And yes, that toast got closed automatically. So this is done. In this episode, we implemented a view user page. We added one back button for better navigation, a custom reusable toast component that is handled using the toast context. So we implemented toast context using React Context API and hero icons for toast icons. So this pattern is commonly used in real production React applications. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next episode.